something about the fall and you're just like,
Yeah.
that sharp intake of breath,
Uh-huh.
and you know it's coming,
Yeah.
but you haven't felt it yet.
Oh, yeah.
Well, imagine if someone they didn't have that at all. No flinch, no anticipation, just like whatever happens, happens. That's kind of the jumping off point for our deep dive today, isn't it?
It really is.
We're going to be looking at the 2025 film Novocaine
That's right.
and all the kind of the buzz and the reception around it.
Yeah. It's really interesting. We've got a lot of different perspectives on this one, mostly from, Rotten Tomatoes, the classic source for these things. So we're going to be looking at both, the critic reviews, those nice distilled opinions, and then also just diving into the audience reactions, which are always a lot more varied.
Yeah, definitely a little bit more unfiltered.
Definitely unfiltered.
Less concerned about, sounding like a professional critic.
Absolutely.
So what we're trying to do, as always, is cut through all that noise.
Right.
We want to kind of figure out, okay, how did this film land? Not just with the, the pros, but also with the everyday moviegoer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. What is working? What's maybe not working? And then ultimately, I think the most important question, what might you find interesting about this, based on all of that?
Yeah. What's in it for the listener? Should they check it out? Should they skip it? What are we thinking here?
Exactly. So before we even get to any of those opinions, we've got to lay the foundation.
Absolutely.
Like, what is this movie even about?
Right. So start with the basics.
Yeah. So Novocaine, at its core, is a story about this guy, Nate, played by Jack Quaid, who is presented as, pretty much your average guy, except there is one, I don't know if you'd call it a tiny difference or a huge difference.
A big difference.
He can't feel pain.
That's a big one.
It's kind of a superpower, isn't it?
Almost like a superhero origin story in a way, right?
Yeah. Well, things get a little bit more complicated
Yes, they do.
when his dream girl, Sherry, played by Amber Midthunder,
Okay.
gets kidnapped.
Uh-oh.
And so that's where Nate's, unique situation, I guess we could call it,
Yeah.
becomes his, competitive edge
Yeah.
in trying to get her back.
Yeah, so it's kind of a classic story, right? This rescue mission, we've seen this a million times.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But just tweaking that one thing, right? The hero has this very unique trait, makes it stand out a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely adds a little bit of a spin to it. And when we look at how the filmmakers themselves have categorized the movie, it gets even more interesting
Oh, yeah.
because they've thrown a bunch of different genres into the mix.
A little bit of everything.
So we've got action, comedy, mystery, thriller.
Wow, that's quite the blend.
So what does that tell us?
Well, it sounds like we can expect a wild ride, right? I mean, we've got the action, maybe some intense fight scenes where Nate shrugs off injuries that would take, normal people down.
Oh, yeah, I can see that for sure.
But then there's comedy too, so maybe some dark humor or some situational humor around that whole inability to feel pain thing.
I think you have to have that.
You have to play with that.
Yeah. And then, of course, mystery.
Yeah. Who kidnapped Sherry?
There's a little puzzle to solve.
Right, and some thriller elements too.
Yeah.
So we're going to be on the edge of our seats as Nate tries to track her down.
Absolutely. And then on top of that, to add another layer here, the film is rated R.
Oh.
And the reasons given are, language throughout,
Right.
grisly images,
Okay.
and strong bloody violence.
So this isn't for the faint of heart, it sounds like.
No. It
Yeah.
seems like, maybe our protagonist might not feel the pain, but they are definitely not shying away from showing it. Let's say that.
Right. And then clocking in at an hour and 50 minutes, it sounds like they're trying to tell a very focused story.
Yeah. Not too short, not too long.
Get in, get out.
Get to the point.
Tell the story.
All right. So we've got this kind of interesting premise.
Yeah.
We've got this blend of genres,
Uh-huh.
rated R. So now the big question is, what did the critics think about all of this?
Right, let's hear it.
So the tomatometer, which, as you mentioned, is pulled from Rotten Tomatoes, is sitting at a pretty solid 82%,
Okay.
based on 177 reviews.
All right, so that's a good chunk of reviews.
Yeah, I mean, that's a decent sample size, I think.
That's pretty solid.
What does that tell us?
Well, it suggests that the critics are, generally favorable towards it.
Yeah.
Maybe not like blown away,
Yeah.
but they're definitely leaning positive.
It's not like a universal masterpiece, but it's something, you can check out.
Yeah, and what I find really interesting here is the critics' consensus.
Oh, yeah. This is always good.
This is where Rotten Tomatoes kind of tries to summarize, like, what is the general vibe?
Yeah, like what's the main takeaway?
What are people saying? And in this case, they highlight the considerable charm of Jack Quaid and Amber Midthunder, the lead actors, and the film's increasingly demented ways to utilize its concept.
Okay.
And they wrap it all up by saying Novocaine is the opposite of a pain to watch.
I love that.
They've got to get that pun in there.
Yeah, you have to. It's too perfect.
But I think it really encapsulates like a key aspect of how the film is being perceived.
It does, and it's funny because I mean, it pops up even in individual reviews. So Kevin Marr,
Okay.
from the Times UK, he actually gives it a 1-star rating.
Oh, wow.
So not super positive on this.
Yeah, that's pretty harsh.
But he has this really interesting take. He kind of says, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says a hero who can't feel pain kind of ironically mirrors the emotional emptiness that he sees in a lot of modern action movies, where a lot of the heroes just, they're invincible anyway.
Right.
It doesn't really matter. Like, they don't really seem to ever be in any real danger.
Yeah, they're just punching their way through.
Yeah. So he's saying that Novocaine's premise is like both its selling point and a symptom of a bigger problem.
I see. So he's using this film to kind of critique the whole action genre.
Yeah. Like almost like, this is just taking it to the most extreme version
Yeah.
of something that's already an issue. I don't know. What do you think about that take?
I mean, it's a really interesting way to frame his negativity, right? It's not just that he thinks the movie's bad.
Right.
He's actually using it to make a bigger point
Yeah.
about what he sees as a lack of stakes, a lack of real danger in a lot of action films.
Yeah, that's fair. And then we have Bruce R. Miller from the Sioux City Journal. He was a little bit more positive.
Okay, good.
Gave it 3 out of 4 stars.
All right.
And he found it to be fast-paced, not too dark or dreary, I guess.
Oh.
And actually kind of funny towards the end.
Okay.
And I think what he appreciated was that even though the protagonist doesn't feel pain, he still faces challenges.
Right. It's not just a complete cakewalk.
Right. It's not just like he breezes through everything.
There's still some obstacles.
Yeah. So then we've got Scott Mendelson
Okay.
from The Outside Scoop. He gives it a 6 out of 10.
All right.
So kind of middle of the road.
Yeah.
And he saw it as almost a throwback, he said, to the kind of movie that studios don't really make anymore. These kind of like mid-budget star-making vehicles.
Right.
So he seems to be kind of appreciate the fact that it's like a solid, entertaining movie, even if it's not, reinventing the wheel or anything.
Yeah. It's just a good time at the movies.
Exactly. And then we have Linda Cook
Okay.
from our Quad Cities. She was a fan.
Oh.
Gave it 3.5 stars.
All right.
And she also played on that pun, that painless pun,
Oh yeah.
by saying, yeah, it hurts, but not the audience.
Gotta get that in there.
Yeah, you gotta.
So she clearly had a good time with it.
She did.
Right.
But then, of course, not every critic loved it.
Right.
We can't expect everybody to be on board with every single movie.
Of course not. You're always gonna have different opinions.
Exactly. So we have Hannah Strong
Okay.
from Little White Lies, gave it 2 out of 5 stars.
Right.
And her feeling was basically, beyond the kind of the fun action choreography.
Yeah.
The film didn't really have anything to say.
Okay.
Like, it wasn't particularly memorable.
Yeah.
And she thought the ending was saccharine and forgettable.
So it didn't really stick with her.
No. And that kind of brings up a really interesting point. Does the kind of the initial, weirdness,
Yeah.
the novelty of the premise, does that carry the whole film? Or do you need something more, to really make it resonate?
Right. Does it have legs? Does it stand on its own beyond that initial hook?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what John Nugent from Empire Magazine was getting at, too.
Okay.
He called it a largely painless viewing experience.
There it is again.
There it is.
Couldn't resist.
But he felt that it could have been, and I quote, far more pleasurable.
Yeah.
So he gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So he's not, hating it, but there's this sense that maybe they didn't quite kind of, realize the full potential
Yeah.
of what they had.
Could have been more.
Yeah, exactly. So it seems like the critics, they're generally leaning positive, right?
Yeah.
82% on the tomatometer is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, that's a good score.
But there's this underlying kind of, question of, did they do enough with the concept?
Right. Are we just impressed by the gimmick?
Yeah.
Or is there something more there?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how, that word painless keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Because in a way, maybe that's their way of saying, the main character doesn't feel physical pain,
Yeah.
but maybe the movie itself doesn't leave a lasting emotional impact.
Interesting. Yeah, it's like that core concept is kind of bleeding into their overall experience.
Yeah, in a way. So, all right. We've heard from the critics. Let's shift gears a little bit.
All right.
What about the audience?
The people who actually paid to see it.
Yeah. What are they saying?
What did they think?
So this is where it gets really interesting because the popcorn meter,
Okay.
which reflects audience scores, that's sitting at a very strong 85%
Oh, wow.
with over 1,000 verified ratings.
So that's a significant difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a huge difference, but it's definitely noticeable.
Yeah.
So it seems like everyday moviegoers are enjoying it a little bit more
Okay.
than the critics are on average. Why do you think that is? Why do we see that sometimes?
Well, I think a lot of times it comes down to just different expectations, right? Critics are looking at films through a different lens, I think. They're thinking about, narrative innovation, thematic depth, all those kind of, artistic considerations.
The craft of filmmaking.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas the audience, I think, is mostly concerned with, is this entertaining? Did I have a good time?
Yeah.
Did it deliver on its promises?
Yeah. Am I going to recommend this to my friends?
Exactly.
So what are the people saying? What are the down in the trenches viewers saying about this movie?
Well, we've got a pretty wide range of comments, as you might expect.
Okay.
So Ronan keeps it simple. He just says, fun movie, great job,
Can't get much more straightforward than that.
5 stars.
5 stars. Done.
Done and done. But then we have Backwhack, who also enjoyed it,
Okay.
praised the action, thought the gore was great,
Right.
but felt like the plot was a little thin,
Yeah.
and that a key surprise was revealed too early.
Okay.
So they gave it a 3.5 out of 5.
So even within those positive reviews, there's still some kind of,
Yeah, some nitpicking.
some constructive criticism.
Yeah. Maybe acknowledging that it's not perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then Peter had a great comment. He called it the silliest movie I have seen in years.
Oh, wow.
But he said he was laughing the whole time. Really enjoyed the comedy, even though there were some moments that made him roll his eyes.
Yeah, so bad it's good kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And he gave it 4 stars.
Okay.
So it seems like the humor, which I think is probably tied to the kind of the absurdity of the premise,
Yeah.
that seems to be working for a lot of people.
Right, you can definitely mine that for some comedy gold.
Yeah. Then there's Cool Karma.
Okay.
Their feedback was interesting. They basically said, look, the plot's okay if you turn your brain off,
Right.
but they really enjoyed how they used the protagonist's inability to feel pain.
Okay.
And they thought Jack Quaid's performance was all right. Not glowing praise, but not a condemnation either.
Yeah, middle of the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they gave it 3 stars. So it's interesting, even when people are kind of like, the plot's whatever.
Yeah.
It's that core concept
Yeah.
that's still drawing people in.
Right. That's the hook.
And then you've got Jody, who just went all in. Described it as action-packed and funny, with shocking, cringe-worthy violence. In a good way, if you like that sort of thing. Gave it 5 stars.
Wow.
So no holding back there.
No, that's a full endorsement. It sounds like they really embraced the more intense aspects of the film.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then finally, we've got Miranda F.,
Okay.
who said it was rewatchable and that it kept them laughing even during the potentially disturbing parts.
Okay.
So also 5 stars from Miranda F. So it's funny, right? Because we had a critic
Yeah.
who called it forgettable,
Uh-huh.
and then we have an audience member who's saying it's rewatchable.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show, I guess, how differently people can react to the same thing.
Absolutely. I mean, what might seem superficial or gimmicky to one person
Yeah.
might be pure entertainment and rewatch value to somebody else.
Yeah. There's no accounting for taste.
No, exactly.
So we've heard a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah.
What are kind of the key takeaways here? What are we learning about Novocaine and its reception?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that this whole concept, the protagonist can't feel pain.
Yeah.
That's the engine of the film.
It's the thing. Right?
That's what's driving the action.
Yeah.
The comedy. It's the initial hook that's getting people interested.
Yeah, it's what makes it stand out.
Exactly. And the critics, they seem to appreciate that inventiveness, but they're a little bit more hesitant, I think, about whether it delivers something truly memorable. Like, beyond that initial novelty, is there something else there?
Right, like, are you still thinking about it a week later?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas the audience, they seem a little bit more forgiving.
Like, as long as I'm entertained, I'm good.
Exactly. They're there for a good time.
Yeah.
And they seem to be getting it. You know, they're enjoying the action, the humor, and even, you know, some of the over-the-top violence.
Right.
It seems like a film that doesn't take itself too seriously, and that appeals to a lot of people.
And I think it's worth noting, we heard a lot of positive mentions of the two lead actors.
Yeah, it's always a good sign.
Jack Quaid and Amber Midthunder. People seem to really be enjoying their performances.
Which makes sense. They're both very talented.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can't forget about the violence.
Right.
I mean, that R rating is there for a reason.
It's not just there for decoration.
And the audience comments really confirm that it's a significant part of the experience.
Right.
And it seems like for some people, that's actually part of the appeal.
Yeah, some people are drawn to that.
So, you know, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, I need to get caught up on this movie, do I need to see it? Do I need to skip it?
Wait, what's the verdict?
What we've tried to do here is give you a really quick, comprehensive overview of kind of the critical and audience reception.
Right, save you some time.
You don't have to read through all those reviews yourself.
Exactly, we've done the hard work for you.
And I think what's really interesting is that we see this difference between what critics are looking for and what the general audience enjoys.
It's a good reminder that there's no one right way to judge a movie.
No.
What one person might consider a masterpiece, another person might find boring.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're the kind of person who, you know, you're intrigued by weird concepts, you like a little bit of action, you're not bothered by, you know, potentially over-the-top violence, Novocaine might be right up your alley.
Yeah, sounds like it could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, especially if you're not looking for something, you know, super deep and thought-provoking.
Right, if you just want to have a good time.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, if you really prioritize, like, intricate storytelling, deep themes, maybe this one's not for you.
Maybe skip it.
Yeah. Ultimately, it really comes down to personal preference, right?
It does.
What are you looking for in a movie?
That's the big question.
All right, so to wrap things up, Novocaine. It's this new action comedy thriller.
Right.
Built around this really interesting concept. A guy who can't feel pain. Audiences seem to be loving it. They're praising the fun, the action, even, you know, as we heard, the shocking, cringeworthy violence.
Right.
But the critics are a little bit more divided.
Yeah, they're not quite sure if it's more than just a gimmick.
Yeah. So here's something I want you to think about.
Okay.
We've talked about this divide, right?
Yeah.
Between the critics and the audience. And how this movie really leans into that no pain concept.
Right.
Does all that make you want to see it?
Yeah. Are you intrigued?
Does it make you curious?
Or are you turned off?
Or are you kind of like, I've heard enough. I'm good.
Yeah.
What do you think this tells us about what people want from movies right now?
That's a good question.
It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to chew on. And hopefully helps you decide what you're going to watch next.